Good morning, everyone. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. First of all, thank you all for joining us this morning for this really important topic on decision-making for adults with disabilities. We have a big group joining us this morning, so I'm so excited that so many of you can make it. Before we get started, there are a couple housekeeping items. This webinar will be recorded and put on our website at www.achievefamilytrust.org. It'll probably be on our website by the end of the day tomorrow. So if you ever want to go back and take a look at it, if you think you missed something, it will be up probably by the end of the day tomorrow. And I will put that website in the chat box as well. If you have any questions and answers, please put them in our Q&A box and we'll take questions at the end of the presentation. I will send out the slides from this presentation later today, so keep an eye out for those. Lastly, sometimes people ask me if I can send an email confirmation. I'm happy to do that. So if you need an email confirmation that you attended this morning's webinar, please just shoot me an email. I'll put that in the chat box as well, and I'll be happy to send you confirmation of attendance. So those are just a couple things that I wanted to go over. I'm really excited to have two fantastic speakers this morning. We have Kelly Darr, who is the legal director at Disability Rights Pennsylvania, and Nancy Murray, who's Senior Vice President of Achieva and President of the ARC of Greater Pittsburgh. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to them and let them get started. Thank you all.
Great. Good morning, everyone. And thanks for sharing part of your morning with Kelly and I. Decision-making is a very, very important topic. And what we're going to do this morning is talk about all of the various ways that people with disabilities can and should be making decisions about very, very important aspects of their life. So again, I'm happy to be here with Kelly. We've done this presentation a few times before, so let's get right to it. So let's start off. Well, what is decision making? Well, it's very simple. It's the process by which people exercise control over our lives. We all engage in decision making. And it's important that we recognize that adults, all adults, including those with disabilities, have the right to make decisions about their lives, and that they're presumed to have the capacity to make their own decisions. And we're going to come back to that word capacity and that idea of capacity in a few minutes. The other thing is the freedom to make decisions is fundamental to personal autonomy and self-determination. Many of us have heard the term self-determination, and that's part and parcel of what we're talking about when we're talking about decision-making. And again, we'll come back to that in a few minutes. Now, the other thing we also have to realize is that sometimes people with disabilities may need supports to help them understand and make decisions. And there's a wide range of supports available, including supported decision-making, which is the topic of a lot of this presentation. As we move on, let's remember that everyone makes decisions in our life, and that decisions can range from very, very simple things, such as what to eat for breakfast, what to wear today, all the way up to including where would I like to go to college, or what job would I like to have, or decisions about finances. So decisions range from very, very simple things regarding our daily lives, all the way up to things that are much more complex. And decision making is a skill that we all developed over our lifespan. No one was born with decision-making skills. We all learn them. And just as our family members, our friends, our teachers, and others taught us about decision-making, it's the same for folks with disabilities. Many people with disabilities already have circles of supports that help them to make decisions. Decision-making is a lifelong process. Again, you just don't make a decision and live with it for the rest of your life. We are constantly making decisions about our life. And each person's support needs are unique unto themselves. So where one person may need help making decisions about what to wear today or tomorrow. Other people may not. So it's very important to recognize that, for people with disabilities, their needs for the type of support they need in making decisions is very individualized. And that it's also very, very important to understand that people with disabilities have the right to be a part of their decision-making process. Just yesterday, I was involved with a situation regarding a young man where certain people in his life decided it was not important for him to attend a meeting regarding where he was going to be moving. Now, thank goodness that young man had an advocate with him, and the meeting was rescheduled so that he would be at the meeting. But it just reminded me that people with disabilities have the right to be a part of making decisions. And just like we need support to make decisions, people with disabilities need support. So what are some of these supports? Well, they can range from simple things such as decision-making and up to and including powers of attorney, advanced directives and living wills, healthcare representatives, and representative payees. And that's what Kelly is going to be talking about in a little bit. But let's go back to decision-making supports. Decision-making supports, as I said before, are grounded in the whole idea of self-determination. And I'm sure most people on the call this morning have heard about self-determination, but let's spend a minute. One thing we know about people who live self-determined lives are that they are more independent. They tend to be more integrated into their communities because they are making decisions about their life. They're healthier. They're making decisions about their health that make sense for them. They're better able to recognize and resist abuse. This is extremely important. We know that people who have good self-determination skills, and this is borne out by research, are much better able to prevent abuse happening to them. And also, they are less likely to experience hopelessness or passivity. So what is supported decision-making? It involves empowering persons with the help of supporters to make choices, again, make choices about what to wear, what to eat for lunch, all the way up to more complex choices about their finances, to understand and explore the options, to be presented with information that they can understand in a way that they can understand it, and have the ability to talk through the pros and cons of those options, to know the risks and the benefits. Let's face it, there are always risks involved with decisions. So just like for us, people with disabilities need to understand, again, the pros and cons, the risks and the benefits of all of the options that they are weighing. It also involves getting guidance and recommendations. And this is where people from their support teams come in. Could be their family members, could be friends, it could be some staff that they spend a lot of time with, but people in their circle of support who they look to for guidance and recommendations on a whole host of things in their lives. It also involves making and communicating a choice. Now, sometimes, we're told or we hear that it's very hard for people with disabilities to make decisions, that they don't have the ability to do that. And part of that comes down to a person's ability to communicate a decision or a choice. And again, we need to always think about how a person communicates in general. And what tools, what supports does a person need to really truly communicate what they're feeling, what they're thinking, and what decisions they would like to make. And then also, people, and that's where, again, people close to them need to help them when the person needs help to carry out that choice. And when we think about all of these steps that are involved with supported decision-making, isn't this really how we all make decisions? How we need to understand and think about, explore all the options, weigh the risks and benefits, the pros and cons. We seek guidance from people who might know more about a certain topic than we do. And we look for people to give us recommendations. And then once we formulate our thoughts and the direction that we'd like to go in, we communicate what that choice is. And sometimes we all need help in carrying out the direction that we would like to go in. It's also very important to know that, supported decision-making, as we've kind of talked about, it's very individualized. It's all based on an individual's ideas and thoughts and dreams about the decisions that that person would like to make. Again, about very simple things in their life, all the way up to very complex things. And for those of us in the human service field, we always talk about programs and plans, but supported decision-making is neither. It's a paradigm. It's a way of planning and thinking. It is not a program. It is not a plan. You're not going to see anything called a supported decision-making plan. And my goodness, it's certainly not done at one of those annual meetings. This is something that happens throughout a person's day or week. And it's not something that is done at one meeting a year, like once and done. It also means working with the person to really think about where the person needs help. Person might not need help making a lot of decisions about his or her life, but sometimes they do. So, the people that are helping, that are supporting people with disabilities, kind of need to step back and think about, okay, where does the person need help? When does the person need help? And how is the best way that it can be provided? And the other thing is that supported decision-making, and you may sometimes see these terms, it can be very informal support. It can be helping a person to choose what to wear today. Now, here in Pittsburgh today, it's kind of rainy and dreary and cold. So somebody may need help today, very informally, in terms of maybe the need to wear a coat today. That's very informal. It can also range all the way up to things such as circles of support, micro boards. Those are more organized forms of helping people make decisions. So let's summarize just for a minute. Supported decision-making refers to the idea that a person has the right to make decisions to the full extent of their capacity. We're going to come back to that word in a minute. To the full extent of their capacity, with the support when and how they need it. So our job as family members, direct support professionals, support coordinators, teachers, our job is to ensure that people have information that's understandable and accessible to them in ways that are very, very individualized. Now, let's come back to that word capacity. What is decision-making capacity? On the next slide here, it talks about capacity. Kelly, can we go to one more slide? There we go. When we talk about decision-making capacity, not legal capacity, decision-making capacity. We're talking about a person's ability to understand, as we talked about, the pros and cons, the benefits and the risks involved in certain choices, the options in front of a person. What are the pros and the cons involved in making a decision? And then the ability to communicate that decision. And remember, that communication, it could be verbally, it could be in a written form, assistive technology may be involved for a person, but the capacity is involving the ability to understand the benefits and the risks, and then to communicate it. And as I said, the ability to share or communicate can be in different forms and very individualized. So it's going to be based on the person's disability, but remember, that decision can be communicated verbally, in written form, through sign language, all types of technology. The person just does not have to sit there and verbally explain a decision. The other thing we have to really realize is capacity is not based on solely IQ. A person with diagnoses of, what we used to call severe and profound intellectual disability can still make decisions about what they would like to eat, what they would like to wear, where they would like to live, what they would like to do in their free time. It is not based on IQ. It is also not based on a diagnosis. Just because a person has a diagnosis of an intellectual disability or autism, it does not mean that person cannot make decisions about his or her life. And as we said before, this is developed. Actually, the more opportunities for decision-making that a person is presented with, more often than not, the person will get better at making those decisions. So as young children are learning about clothing and what clothing is to be worn when it's warm out or cold out, as they learn those skills, as their life goes on, we realize that, and research shows this, that their capacity continues to be developed to be able to make higher order decisions. And last but not least, we have to start by presuming capacity. So for family members, for professionals, we have to remember this. People make decisions every day, very simple decisions, all the way up to complex decisions. We all do. We make decisions as our days go on, each and every day. And people should be able to make these decisions and to make them voluntarily. And we also need to remember that people need help. Just like we do, people with disabilities will need help, not for every decision, but for certain decisions, certain days, they will need assistance to make certain decisions. And that's where supports will come in for them, for circle of supports, for their team. But we also need to remember that we have to presume the capacity of people. We have to begin by realizing that they have the capacity, they have the ability to make decisions every day. Now I'm going to turn it over to Kelly to talk more about some decision-making supports.
Great. Thanks, Nancy. I'm trying to turn my camera on. There it goes. Okay, great. Again, my name is Kelly. I'm from Disability Rights Pennsylvania, and I'm going to talk about healthcare decisions and financial decisions, and specifically What happens if a person with a disability or your family member or the person that you're working with is at a point where they either need someone to make a decision for them, or what we find happens a lot of times, they get into a situation where a decision that they're making is challenged. And so in the healthcare context, the thing that comes up with some frequency is a person may be operating in their life and they've got they're exercising supportive decision making like Nancy just described, and they may have a circle of support who is helping them to navigate decisions in their life as they need it, and they may come to a doctor appointment where there's a discussion about some kind of treatment or some kind of procedure or something that is being considered by the individual, and there may be a challenge from the doctor or the healthcare provider or the hospital to the person's ability to make that decision. And we see it all the time. I'm sure some of you have encountered it as well, where often the first thing that people say is, who's the guardian for this person? And somebody's going to need to get guardianship so that we have a decision maker who can make this decision. So I'm going to go into give a lot of information on this topic that hopefully will be helpful, but the takeaway that we're going to repeat multiple times today is that guardianship is not necessary, even in that situation that I just described, where either the person doesn't have the ability or the capacity to make a decision about healthcare, or that decision-making ability is being challenged. Under Pennsylvania law, in those situations, guardianship is not necessary in order to be able to move forward. But there are so many ways that are provided under the law to take care of it in that situation. And there are ways to plan in advance and to be prepared for that kind of scenario, and I'm going to talk about that. And also we have a great provision under Pennsylvania law that even if a person hasn't really prepared in advance, there's a way for decision making to occur in that situation. Even if a doctor is challenging the ability of the individual to make their own decision, there's a way for decision making to be done. So that's what we're going to talk about in this first situation around healthcare decision making. The other, I wanted to tag on just a little bit as well onto what Nancy was saying about capacity, because that was all great and so very important to think about capacity, and that we need to presume that people have capacity, even though sometimes you'll encounter people, right, in some places that maybe are basing, they've got misinformation and they're giving out misinformation, and they're maybe not presuming that people with disabilities have capacity. But we need to do that, and it's very important. And also to think about capacity as not an ability that is either on or off. It's not like a person flips on and yes, this person has capacity to make decisions, or flip it off and they don't. It's actually depending on, and Nancy even said it, day to day, over time, things change. It depends on the type of decision that somebody is making. And the real question for capacity is, do they have the ability to make the decision that is in front of them in that moment? Like, what is the subject matter that they're trying to decide? So it may be that someone doesn't have capacity to really navigate a complicated decision-making process where there's maybe a lot of variables, but a lot of times, even if that's not true, people can have capacity to make a lot of medical decisions. If the pros and cons are presented to them, they can express their decision, they can express their preferences. And so capacity, you just need to keep a very open mind and a flexible mind about what capacity is for all of us in terms of decision making. There it goes. Okay, so let's talk about it again in the healthcare context. Here's some things that you, as a person with a disability, or your family member, or the person that you're working with or supporting, what can be done now to prepare for a situation where maybe at some point healthcare decision-making may be challenged. Either the person doesn't have capacity at the time or is just thought to not have it, right? And the decision is being challenged. So the first is a concept called advanced directives, and it's really just kind of like what it sounds. It's a person puts down the directions in terms of what they want to have happen in advance. So it's an advanced directive. There are two kinds. The first is called a living will, and the second are powers of attorney. And those terms might be familiar. I think sometimes people think a power of attorney is the same thing as a guardianship, and it is not at all. It's more limited in scope. So the first advanced directive, a living will, is a document that a person would set out, and all of us can do this. We should all think about this in terms of decision making. If there would be a time in our lives, whether we have a disability now or not, where decision making could become impaired, and we would not have the capacity. So anybody can do these advanced directives. The living will is a document that sets forth specifically a person's wishes and decisions that they're making now about what they want to have happen at the end of their life, like if they're an end of life stage medical condition or if they've become permanently unconscious. So the idea with an advanced directives is while you have capacity to make decisions now, you're going to set down in a document what you want those decisions to be, what your wishes are for those specific things. So a living will is specific to those kind of end of life situations, whereas a power of attorney is more broad and can cover all kinds of medical decisions. Again, it's a document that sets forth in advance the decisions that a person wants to make about healthcare. Like if they want a certain kind of treatment, do they want to have nutrition? Do they want to have resuscitation? Just about anything that you can think of in terms of medical treatment, you can put those wishes down ahead of time in a document called a power of attorney. And with a power of attorney, you need to name an agent, a healthcare agent, which is a person who is going to basically carry out the details of that power of attorney document, so that those decisions will be made on your behalf at some time in the future when you no longer have capacity to make those decisions. Oftentimes people will do a combination of living will and power of attorney together in that kind of an advanced directive that kind of covers both situations, just more regular routine medical questions as well as potentially end-of-life situations. So it's not a complicated document to develop, and there's going to be some information at the end for directions to our website at Disability Rights Pennsylvania. And we have just a lot of materials on decision making for people with disabilities, including all of these alternatives to guardianship that we're talking about today, including some form documents so you can see kind of examples of some of these things. And you could develop this for either yourself or for your family member in advance. So those are advanced directives. Again, that's a situation where the person needs to have capacity to make those decisions. So again, the ability to make the decisions that are the subject of the document. They need a capacity at the time. They execute that document, and then that means that in the event that their decision making is challenged or they don't have capacity in the future, these documents will come into play, and the decisions that were made earlier can be carried out at that time. I also have a button on here just to remind everyone that it's not just for physical health, but also for mental health as well. There is a mental health advanced directive. It's like a power of attorney for mental health decisions. And so things about treatment, or if you wanted to be in a particular hospital or not, and all kinds of questions related to potential mental health treatment is here as well. Again, if you're a person with a mental health diagnosis and you have capacity now, but you think at some point down the road you might require treatment and your capacity may be challenged, it's important to do this document in advance. Make sure that you have an agent that has a copy of the document that's going to help you in that situation, or provide the document to your healthcare providers so that they know who decision makers will be in those situations. So you can think about this in terms of your physical healthcare decisions as well as mental healthcare decisions. So let's say that either you haven't put together these advanced directives ahead of time, or maybe the person maybe doesn't have capacity to do those advanced directives even now, to be able to write, put those decisions in writing and execute that document to be an advanced directive. We still have alternatives, right? It doesn't mean that the person needs to have a guardian appointed. There is something in Pennsylvania called healthcare representatives, and it's been on the books for a while now. Not as many people are familiar with this option that's available, but it's well established in Pennsylvania law, and it's something that medical providers should and do recognize. And so the concept of a healthcare representative is that you don't have to have a formal written legal document that has been signed and copied, made, and all of that. It's just that if you are seeking healthcare and the doctor or the healthcare provider says, I don't think this person has capacity to make the decision that is before them in terms of what treatment needs to be taken or a procedure that needs to be done, a healthcare representative will be identified, and that person will be able to make the decision about that treatment or procedure. Now, a person can designate that healthcare representative ahead of time. And so you don't need to have really a formal document with all of your decisions already made, but you could just notify your doctor, and I would do it in writing, to say, in the event that that happens, my healthcare representative is my mother, my father, my sister, my best friend, whoever it is. You can name anybody who is an adult to be your healthcare representative, and just by designating that person under Pennsylvania law, that person will be able to carry out your medical decisions in the event that you cannot. And the idea there is that healthcare representative should be familiar with your preferences and what you generally would like to have happen, so that healthcare representative can carry those wishes out for you, even though they're not formally put into a document like a power of attorney. They can still do it for you in the context of that medical decision. So you can designate a healthcare representative. It's very simple. It's literally just naming a person. And it should be somebody that you trust and that knows you. Even if a person with a disability whose capacity is questioned hasn't even designated a healthcare representative in advance, still, it's okay. At that time, what should happen when it's been determined that there's no advanced directives that are in place and the person has not designated a healthcare representative, what happens under Pennsylvania law is there is a list of priority that the healthcare provider should go through. So the first person that they look for is, does the person have a spouse? Because then the spouse would be the healthcare representative. And if no spouse, then you look to adult children. And if there's no adult children, then you go to the person's parent. And if there's no parent, you go to an adult sibling. And then if there's no adult sibling, you can go down the list until you literally get to the last category under Pennsylvania law, which is just an adult, any adult, with knowledge of the person and the person's preferences. And then that person is designated as the healthcare representative in that context, and they can make that decision about what the person is going to decide about that particular treatment or procedure. And again, the idea is that there's a person there that's familiar with the person for whom these decisions are about, so that they can carry out the person's preferences, what they know the person likes and doesn't like, or wants or doesn't want, even in that situation where that person is not able to make the decision themselves, or that decision is not being honored, right, by the healthcare provider. I know that's a lot, and if you haven't heard any of that before, it's probably a lot to take in. I promise we'll have questions at the end, and also just so many resources on our website that you can look at after this to read more about it and see some examples, and so hopefully that will help.
Hey, Kelly.
Yes.
Patty. I just had a quick comment. There's a little bit of background noise. Do you hear it at all on your end?
No, I don't.
Okay. I'm not sure. Yeah, why that's happening. Maybe it's the Zoom, setup, but that's okay. Then we can all hear you just fine. It's just there's a little bit of like static or something.
I'm going to take off my headset and see if that helps.
Okay.
Does that help?
I can still hear it, but
Yeah.
like I said, we can hear you just fine. I just didn't know if there was, something else going on.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it is because I can't hear the noise on my end. It sounds.
No worry. It might just be something in Zoom because Nancy and I are both muted. But like I said, we can hear you just fine. So just thought you were pausing for a minute, I'd mention it. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Sure. Sorry about that, everyone. I hope it's not too annoying to hear that. Okay, sorry. I think I went backwards. Okay, here we go. Financial decisions. Whoops, now I went too many. There we go. So same kind of thing. I'll talk about what happens with financial decisions. So again, if a person gets to a point where they maybe don't have the capacity to make the financial decision that's in question, or what happens again that we see where a financial decision is being challenged. So a person may be getting through their life and making all kinds of decisions either on their own or with some support, and then they come up onto something like they need to do a transaction with a bank, or they want to rent an apartment and they need to sign the lease documents or something like that. And they'll come up against a challenge where somebody says, I don't think this person has the capacity to sign this, and I'm looking for a different decision maker, right? And again, this is probably not a surprise at this point, guardianship is not necessary in this situation, and we're going to talk about some of the alternatives that are available under Pennsylvania law in addition to the supported decision making that Nancy talked about at the beginning, some other tools that we can use to help people navigate through these decisions and these transactions that they need to do in their lives without having to undergo a guardianship process. So again, and these will be somewhat familiar, things you can do now ahead of time to prepare for a possible situation like this. And the main tool for financial decisions is, and this is probably familiar to many people, is to get a power of attorney, to do a document that is called a power of attorney, where you designate an agent to help with, you can designate what kinds of financial decisions and to help manage your money or to do certain transactions. You can have a document. Again, it's pretty simple to designate an agent and the scope of that authority for that person to be able to make decisions, sign documents, do financial transactions, etc., like on your behalf. And again, the idea is if you set this out ahead of time, when you have the capacity to do it, it can then go into effect and your wishes be carried out in the event that that decision-making ability is challenged at some point. So that's a very important tool and something that you can do now ahead of time. Another thing that is a very helpful tool for people with disabilities, for those who receive Social Security benefits, so SSI or SSDI, and if a person needs some help, maybe managing those benefits that they receive, they can apply with the Social Security Administration for a representative payee to be appointed for them. And it's a relatively simple process. It's just a short determination is made by Social Security that the person could benefit, that's the standard, by having someone appointed to be the representative payee. The person with the disability can say, I would like so-and-so to be my representative payee. If the person doesn't have someone who could be the representative payee for them, there are also individuals or organizations and agencies that serve as representative payees for people. There are rules about being a representative payee, and there's some monitoring of those payees that is done, including by a program within my office. The protection advocacy organizations have a program by which we monitor representative payees to make sure that they're managing the funds of the beneficiaries appropriately. So there are some checks and balances on that are in the system. And this representative payee then would receive the benefits, the Social Security benefits for the person with a disability, and help them to manage it by ensuring that their bills are paid. So first the money is used to pay for rent, for food, for utilities, for like the essentials in the person's life. After that, once those bills are paid, any additional funds are used to pay any outstanding past bills that the person might have. If the person has dependents, it would go towards care for those dependents. The money can go for entertainment and things that the person, wants to use the money for, just like we all do, right? Pay bills first and then use the rest for things that are more fun than paying bills. And that's exactly how it goes with the representative payee. And then if there's any money left at the end of all of those expenses, they do try to help the person save some of their benefits for, future spending or future expenses that may come up. And there is an idea that the representative payee should be in contact with the person with a disability, discussing kind of what that person wants or needs in their life. So the person is not completely cut out of the involvement in the management of their money, but it's a way to make sure that the Social Security benefits are secure, and that they're helping the person to pay for the essential things that need to be paid for in their life. So that is a relatively easy process to go through to have that appointed, to get a person to be a representative payee for a person with a disability if that kind of assistance is needed for financial management. And again, if the only assets and income that the person has is really related to Social Security benefits and not a lot more, again, there's no need for a guardianship for financial decisions because there's not a lot to manage there other than the Social Security benefits. And then there's a process in place that's very easy for the person, and it retains their autonomy to a large degree, different from in a situation where guardianship is ordered. We have a couple more things on this slide just for people to consider as they're thinking about financial planning and financial supports for themselves or somebody in their family that may need assistance. There are ABLE accounts that are available that you can put monies into. If you're a Social Security beneficiary that has a disability that onset before the age of 26, you can deposit money. I think the limit this year, someone will correct me if I'm wrong, I think is $16,000, and there's some other rules about the amounts that can go in, but you can put a pretty significant amount of money every year into an ABLE account. It can be the person with a disability themselves, or other people can make deposits into those accounts. And the idea is that allows people with disabilities to have some savings, like all of us try to do, without being detrimental to their eligibility for continued benefits. And so ABLE accounts are a really good tool to use. I know Achieve a Family Trust knows a lot about ABLE accounts, more than I do, and trusts and special needs trusts. But it's a good tools to think about when you're thinking about financial decision making and planning for those kinds of things. You can manage the ABLE account yourself, or you can appoint a person to help manage that money in that account as well. So that's another way that if some additional support is needed, you can structure it in such a way to provide that support to the person who is the beneficiary of the account. And last is trust. And that's a complicated topic. I really suggest that anybody that's considering putting together a trust for a person, that you get some advice about how to do that so that you structure it appropriately and that you're following the rules, again, so that it doesn't end up affecting the person's eligibility for benefits. But there are trusts that are available, including special needs trusts, and those funds are managed by a trustee, again, to the benefit of the person with a disability, with certain rules about what it can be used for. So again, it's just another tool to think about in terms of things that can be set up to just try to maintain as much decision-making autonomy for people with disabilities as possible. Okay, great. And with that, I'll turn it back to Nancy, and I'll turn off this hopefully annoying noise.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. So kind of in summary now, how we've talked about a lot of this. How do we go about incorporating supported decision-making into our everyday lives? Well, first of all, people with disabilities need to be presented with opportunities to make decisions. And again, this goes all the way back to some simple things, such as, asking a person what they would like to wear tomorrow, what they would like to have for dinner tonight, allowing people to make decisions and to practice making those decisions, to understanding the pros and cons when they are thinking through decisions. Also, we also need to be reminded to offer information in accessible ways for people. Not everybody with disabilities can read, so we may need to present information to them in a way that does not require them to read words. For people, who rely on sign language, we need to make sure that that's available to them when we're presenting information. We need to offer help and facilitate exploring options. And that means being available to really help a person think through all of the risks, but also the benefits of some of the things that they're thinking about, whether it's moving into a certain apartment or maybe choosing a housemate. Being able to sit with a person, meet the person where the person is with their decision making, and just helping them to think through, not making a decision for them, but helping them to think through kind of what if scenarios. Well, what if you move into that apartment? What will that mean? What will your rent be? Are you going to be able to afford that? Those are some of the conversations to have with people to help them explore what their options are. And again, offering support in thinking through potential outcomes. So for a person thinking about an apartment, thinking through what they can afford, maybe it will come down to, well, if you move into that apartment, you're not going to have a lot of extra spending money. But if you looked at the other apartment, you would have more spending money to do other things each month. So thinking about what the outcomes of their decisions might be. And then when the person really has made a good decision for him or herself and wants to go forward, with the next step, helping that person to communicate to everybody in their life and on their team, why that decision was made. And then, we talk a lot with people with disabilities about becoming self-advocates, taking control for making their decisions. And these are some of the ways that people learn these skills. First of all, we really encourage people with intellectual disabilities and autism to really run their own meetings. So, for that annual ISP meeting, or for children or students still in school, to run their IEP meetings, to take control of their meetings, thinking about who to invite, and thinking about what they want to say during meetings. Also, exercising their rights and their responsibilities at times. For example, next month, we're going to have the opportunity once again to vote. That's an important right that people with disabilities have. So supporting people with disabilities to exercise their rights, such as to vote. But also, with rights come responsibilities. And, helping people to understand that, yes, you have certain rights to do things, but you also have responsibilities. Being a contributing citizen. A lot of our self-advocates are very, very interested in volunteering and being more and more a part of their communities. So helping people to make decisions about ways that they can contribute back to their community. We do here at Achieva, we have a group of self-advocates called Empowered Voices. And as I said, it's a self-advocacy group. And it's really, it's amazing to really watch the participants, the members of the group, from the beginning of each year in September through this time of the year, as they have learned to make decisions for themselves, to speak up for themselves. And that's one of the things that we really teach, we mentor in these young people. Just ways that they can, as I said, speak up for themselves. There are some resources that you might be interested in looking into. And again, as Kelly said, a lot of information on the disabilityrightspa.org website. There's also a website, supportdecisionmaking.org, totally devoted to supported decision making. I think that might be our last slide. So at this point, Patty, do we turn it back to you now?
Yes, there are a couple questions. The first one, what happens to the monies in a PA able when the person becomes deceased, since PA able does not have beneficiary?
Sorry about that. Did I stop sharing the screen?
No, you're up. We see you.
We're good.
Yeah, sorry. I was trying to, is my audio any better?
It is better. Yes, I don't hear the static anymore.
Yeah, sorry. I was trying to fix it. And I think at one point, Nancy, I put the calculator up on the screen because I was trying to hit my audio button. So I'm sorry about that, Nancy.
That's okay. I think the audience knows technology is not our main skill. That's okay.
Because we've been doing this now for what, 2.5 years, there's always something new. And I know. We heard you just fine.
I'm really sorry about the audio before. I couldn't hear it on my end. So I didn't realize it was a problem. So the question, and I'm going to say, I'm happy to try to get the answer to that. I actually don't know the answer to that question. My area of expertise is definitely not able accounts and trust questions. And I don't know if somebody else from Achieva Family Trust may know that answer. So I'll defer if you do.
Actually, you can name a beneficiary for Pennsylvania able accounts. You can name a beneficiary. So yeah, you can do that. It can be a non-disabled sibling or a disabled sibling that you can name as the beneficiary.
Perfect.
So, and we do at the trust get a lot of questions about able accounts. Obviously, we don't administer them. They are administered by the Pennsylvania State Treasury. So we host a lot of speaker programs though throughout the year. And we usually do have one a year on able accounts. And we even have some on our website that are recorded that were presented by representatives from the Treasury Department. So if anyone wants more details, please visit our website under the recordings of webinars and you'll find one there on the able.
When we have questions at DRP about ABLE accounts and trusts, we call Achieve a Family Trust. Just this week, we talked to somebody there about a trust issue. Yeah.
We're lucky that we can all work together.
Yeah.
Next question. If a parent has legal guardianship of their son or daughter, should the residential provider discuss all decisions with the parent prior to having the individual go to the doctor or making large purchases?
So I can address that one to get started. So I think it's hard to answer that in the abstracts, because the first thing I would want to know is what is the scope of the guardianship that the family member has. There are different kinds of guardianship. It can be limited, so it might be limited to very certain kinds of decision making. It could be something called plenary, which means it's more broad. There are different kinds. It could be guardianship of just the estate, which just means financial decisions, or it could be over what's called guardianship of the person, which means decisions related to like healthcare and other types of decisions that are not financial. So what I always want to know, like, what is the scope of the guardianship? Because otherwise the person, that person isn't the decision maker. Neither of those actors are the decision maker, right? So I would want to know that. And even if it's a plenary guarding, like a broad guardianship, there still can be scope to the order itself in terms of what should be part of that decision making or not. And then on top of all of that, even if a person is under a guardianship order, what the guardianship law says in Pennsylvania is that the guardian still needs to carry out the wishes of the person that is under guardianship to the maximum extent that they can. Kind of recognizing again that people, even if they don't have capacity for some of these kinds of decisions, do have capacity to contribute towards the decision, and that the guardian has the the requirement, the duty to incorporate that into what they're doing in terms of decisions. So all that being said, I would think that the residential provider should contact the guardian and the person that's the subject to the guardianship order to talk about whatever those things are that need to be decided, financial decisions and healthcare decisions that both the person with a disability that's the subject of the guardianship, as well as the guardians, should be informed.
Great. The next question, and all it is stated, is recovery to Medicaid. I'm not sure what that means. I don't know if you guys know what that means.
I'm not sure, Nancy, do you know what that's referring to? It's,
I'm wondering I'm wondering if it was the same person, I think, who asked the question about the ABLE accounts. So I can answer that. If what you're asking is, does Medicaid have to be paid back with any remaining funds in an ABLE account? In Pennsylvania, the answer is no, not at this time, but that could change. So other states do require Medicaid to be paid back, but at this time, Medicaid does not have to be paid back. So any funds left over in an ABLE account can be used to pay any, funeral expenses, burial expenses, or it can go to a disabled sibling if that sibling is eligible for ABLE accounts. But no, Medicaid does not have to be paid back at this time. So stay tuned. Hopefully it'll stay that way. And I think someone did mention, I saw in the chat, the ABLE account was raised this year. The limit that you can contribute is $16,000 a year versus $15,000 as it was previous. So it's up to $16,000. But I think that looks like that was the only questions. Does anyone else have any questions out there? Great. Well, thank you both. This was a fantastic presentation, and we really appreciate you sharing your expertise in this field. And I know I learned a lot today, and I'm sure everyone else did. And I'm just looking, I'm sorry. So I was just reading to see that. Okay. Go ahead.
I think it said they couldn't ask their question now, but they would like some advice. So if I could, I think on the last slide that we had, it was Disability Rights Pennsylvania has a live intake system. And we're actually available to answer questions on all kinds of disability rights issues, guardianship and decision making, as well as all kinds of other things in terms of rights that people with disabilities have. You can call that 1-800 number. It's 800-692-7443. We are live. We answer calls live 9 to 3, Monday through Friday. So if you do have advice, if you'd like some advice about a question and that maybe you don't want to raise here, you can call that number, and people will either be able to answer when they pick up, or you'll be assigned to someone on staff who can call you back and talk through your situation and give you some advice, and maybe send you some of those publications that I talked about that might be particularly helpful to you. So I'll put that in there as a resource for people as well.
And Kelly, is that number 1-800-692-7443?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to put that in the chat box as well, but I will be sending out the slides later today as well. And so, the contact information will be there. And I actually just put my email address in the chat box as well. So if anyone has any further questions about ABLE accounts or special needs trusts, they can contact me or, visit our website. That's fine too. So anyway, and again, this webinar will be recorded and put on our website, hopefully by the end of the day tomorrow, probably Monday at the latest. So I just, again, want to thank Nancy and Kelly for your time today. I know you guys are both really busy, but we really appreciate you always supporting our programs and so many people in the community as well. We had a big group, so I hope, thank you again.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Okay, take care. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.